Hello everybody, welcome to E3 2014. My name is Chris Plant. I am joined today by Ben Kuchera to talk with the creative director of Assassin's Creed Unity, Alex Amancio. How are you doing today?
Great, great. Yourself?
I'm doing very well because you were telling me a little bit about the game beforehand, and it's so much more than I actually understood it to be from... We actually saw quite a bit of gameplay yesterday, especially compared to a lot of games at E3. Yeah. So I think that would actually be a great place to start. We were talking about, how much of this game is co-op like we saw shown yesterday, and how much is single player.
So essentially, there's one city, seamless, and you can go from the single-player experience to the cooperative experience seamlessly through that. So part of the game constitutes Arnaud's single-player story. So it's his own path to redemption. Another part is all of the different activities that you get to do in Paris. These are murder mysteries. These are, quests where you find these stories about these people that lived in Paris. You also have all of these different quests, these contracts, and then you have what we call the Brotherhood Missions. The Brotherhood Missions are missions that Arnaud did for the assassins. You can do all of these missions solo or with up to 3 friends.
Wow. And when you're doing all of this, does that mean there will be basically a traditional single-player mode, and then if you plug in online, you'll be able to seamlessly have people just kind of jump in with you?
All of this is seamless. So, for example, if we're friends on Xbox Live, for example, and I'd be playing my game, what would happen is if you go into a tavern, you would see my avatar sitting there at the tavern, and seamlessly you could just join in progress. Or you could access your menus and just access that through the menus.
Cool. So I'm going to throw it to the gameplay so people can see what this actually looks like. And we'll just kind of keep talking. One of the other things that you mentioned was Nostradamus is part of the mission.
Well, essentially, Nostradamus is a character that lived in Paris, a real-life person that lived in Paris in the Middle Ages, and he sort of left clues. So you have these treasure hunts that you can discover all over Paris. And you know how we have these database entries? Since AC1, we have these really complex database entries where you can find out about history, about monuments, stuff like that. And they're just cool because you can learn about history, but they don't really do anything in terms of stuff you need to know for the game. Except for now, you can actually find clues in the entries to these riddles that Nostradamus left. And if you follow these clues, the riddles, that leads you to a next breadcrumb, and then you find stuff, stashes.
Go ahead.
You've slid some education in here. You might be teaching these kids about history.
No, we're tricking you into learning.
That should be the Ubisoft tagline. It tricked you into learning.
Exactly.
Were you excited when you saw that Nostradamus was a possibility, considering all of the doomsday within Assassin's Creed?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, and you know what? Every time we choose a location, we choose it for whatever reason we choose the location, we always end up finding stuff about the location that it comes as a surprise, and it always sort of fortuitously, serendipitously seems to fit with whatever we want to do with the brand in terms of conspiracy stuff and all like that.
So I have a question that I've been wanting to ask since I saw this yesterday, because we saw the 4 people just do a great job dismembering people in the cooperative game yesterday.
Yeah.
If I played with Ben, who's a jerk in real life, the first thing he would do is stab somebody in the neck and start chaos. Do I have the option to extinguish him if I know this is going to happen, or how do you keep people playing together in a game like this?
So I mean, co-op, I tend to refer to the experience as a shared experience more often than I do co-op. Not because co-op is a bad word or anything, just because when you say co-op, everybody has a different thing that pops in their mind, right? You have games where the co-op is actually, gating. There's a door, there's 2 levers, and 2 players need to pull those levers to open the door, and that's co-op, right? Yeah. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is a shared experience within the Assassin's Creed world. So there's a couple of ways we can encourage people to play together. First of all, strength in numbers. If the game is hard enough, if combat is challenging enough, then people will gang up to fight. Another way is through positive reinforcement. So, for example, if when we're together at a certain distance, we actually get a benefit. For example, any rewards I get are shared for the whole group that is sort of tethered. That's another way of doing it, something else that we do. And then by making, for example, if our characters are complementary in terms of skills, typically AC has characters evolve very little throughout the game. I mean, they certainly evolve a lot in the story, but very little in terms of actual gameplay. It's different for Unity because we have skills, right? You can earn skill points, you can invest those skill points and buy skills, and then you can upgrade those skills. There's also hundreds of different gear elements, and the gear elements really have a bearing on how you play. For example, I mean, a hood might make you harder to spot in the crowd, a belt might enable you to carry more X, Y, or Z. So if you gear up in a way where you're complementary to your buddies, well, then again, you're stronger as a group because, I might be the eagle sense specialist and I'm the scout, and then somebody else might be, the lockpick guy, stuff like that.
You talked about black box before the show. Is that the right word, black box?
Yep, it's a word that we use internally to describe, we talk a lot about it, and I've spoken quite a bit about how we redefine the core pillars of Assassin's Creed on Unity, the navigation, the combat, and the stealth. But Assassin's Creed is really a game about mid-level, about how you interact with those systems in the world. So, and that's all about missions. And we've pretty much had very similar mission pillars since AC2. They've certainly evolved with every game, but essentially they're you got a tail, you got a chase, you can have a fight, whatever. And I mean, if you think about it, there's not a million different things you can do in real life. However, the way they are presented has certainly evolved a lot on Unity. We've completely changed the philosophy. So we now have only two large categories of missions. The first one is an AMM, adaptive mission mechanic, and the other one is black box. The AMM, just to give you a small example of how it would work. For example, in the mission, in the narrative, you need to find the location of some base, right, of some enemy base, and the way to find it is to tail a guard or a bad guy towards the mission. Traditionally, that would be a tail mission. On Unity, what we try to do is give a mission a theme, but then allow the player to express his own way of playing and have the game adapt to that. So the tail, the mission might start off as a tail, and then the guard or the enemy just turns around and spots you, he bolts. It becomes a chase. If you lose that enemy, it can become a locate. For example, if by chasing that enemy, the enemy gets trapped in a faction fight and gets killed, if you loot the body, you might find an address that leads you to the base. However, because the dude's dead and he's missing, maybe there's twice as many guards. So everything you do will be taken into account by the game, and the mission will sort of adapt to that.
Yeah. So to clarify on that, because I loved Black Flag, fantastic game. There's a mission for me where I had to tail somebody on an island.
Yep.
And it was maybe not my most favorite thing about it.
Yeah.
In Unity,
Yep.
the idea would be that if that wasn't my favorite thing, the mission could evolve in a way that would better suit how I want it.
Exactly. There's a certain parameter in which the mission can evolve to adapt to your playstyle.
Wow.
And that's for the AMMs. And then the black box that you were mentioning earlier is essentially a 360-degree mission. We define a physical location and we say, this is your playground for this mission. It can be an interior, but it can be an exterior. It can be just a slice of Paris, and there's a target to get in there. Now, in the black box, first, when you start the mission, we clearly define what the playground is, and then we tell you, explore the environment, create opportunities, and then kill the target. So you get to analyze different parameters of that black box and try to find original ways of completing your mission. And for example, you can have a mission, a mission in Notre Dame, the Notre Dame Cathedral, one of the biggest landmarks of Paris. And it's an assassination, for example. But before getting to that mission, you've explored Paris and you've discovered side content. And there's a mission that you did in the cemetery nearby where you unlocked the script, and you discovered that the script has a tunnel that leads into Notre Dame. It's sort of a secret passage. Well, once you get to that mission, you have that knowledge because you've done that mission before. Well, you can certainly use that secret passage to find a really cool way of completing the mission. So it really depends on how you want it. And if you replay, you can replay it a completely different way and get a whole new experience.
Interesting. It seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the previous generation, and Assassin's Creed was partly like this, had a lot of focus on story and a bit of linearity. And it sounds like what you're describing is moving away from that in a way. Is the story, in Unity and maybe Assassin's Creed going forward more about what the player is creating, or are we still going to see that kind of hard narrative drive that we saw in previous games?
You're still going to have a sense of a very strong narrative story. It's just the way that we're telling the story that shifts a little bit. And typically what we've done before, and it was partly because of technological limitations, right, is you start off with the cinematic, and then there's mission blocks, and then you have a cinematic, right? So the story is what's told in between those two, in the first and the last cinematic, the beginning and then the conclusion. We've tried to shift that so that the story is really not limited to that, but the story is what happens you on the way to the other cinematic, right? So the cinematics, the theme, and the information that's given to you in the cinematics might not be the same type of information. It might be character development, and mission beats might be actually achieved through the actual mission itself. One, just to give you because it might be very abstract what I've just said, but just to give a little bit of a more detailed, something concrete. You remember the white rooms that we had before. You stab a target, and then you have this moment where the target talks to you, and you get to learn more about the target and the motivations, all that stuff. We changed the way the white rooms operate in Unity. Now, what those white rooms are now is more like imagine the moment before the target gets killed. You sort of slow time down, and just before the blade hits, you have the target have his life flash before his eyes, and you see flashes of those memories, and those memories fill in stuff that was missing in your narrative.
Interesting. So you're showing versus telling, basically.
Exactly.
In the past, where it was like,
exactly.
Here's all the information you need to know before I die.
Yeah, and before, he was sort of saying, I'm a bad guy because I did this and that. Now, you have information that you need from the character, and you get his perspective, his memories on that information. So you're not necessarily getting side content, you're actually filling in the gaps of your main quest. For example, if you're looking for a culprit, and this guy knows who it is, maybe you might be seeing an angle of that culprit in a meeting, you're like, okay, I know who it is now. For example.
Is the reason for that explained in universe? Like, do you make it explicit how you're able to basically do a mind meld at the point of death?
Yeah, it is explained, and it really has to do with it's sort of an offshoot of Eagle Sense. We've certainly explained this before. Certain assassins, most of our main protagonist assassins have a very high concentration of first Civ DNA, and this is what Eagle Sense is, right? It's an echo of a sense that the first Civ had. It's sort of that sixth sense that we don't have, but they have, which they had, and Eagle Sense is a sort of a remnant, an echo of it. This is also a little bit of an echo of that sixth sense the first civilization had.
Yeah, one of the things I've always loved about this series is just that you can engage with the world in fun ways that are not violent. Like, even in the basic sense of the first one, just getting around the world. And then I remember, this is a weird one, but the first-person 3D puzzles, which I have a special place in my heart for, and maybe I'm the only person, but I love them.
You're the one.
I'm the guy. I'm so sorry. But I'm curious, is there anything that you can talk about that's in this game that is, kind of a non-violent way of engaging with the world?
Certainly. I sort of mentioned it very, very briefly earlier, but we have seamless interiors, right? You can go inside of houses, commerces, stuff like that, and sometimes you'll have missions there. But not all interiors have missions, but all interiors tell a story. For example, there might be one where, just as an example, you find a dead body in an interior. There's blood everywhere, and you're like, what the hell? And you turn on Eagle Sense, and you see that there's traces of blood next to a painting, and if you inspect, there's something, he was able to hide something there before. Maybe it's a letter, maybe it's whatever. Letters is another element that we have. That we have letters that are spread out through Paris that you can explore and find. These letters give you information about, slices of life, of people that actually lived in the French Revolution, information about events, little-known events about the French Revolution. Maybe some guy was writing a song and it became a really famous revolutionary song. We also have we have a mechanic where you have your villa is sort of a cafe. And it's a revolutionary cafe where people share ideas and people, have theater and songs and stuff like that.
Very French.
Exactly. And as you explore the city, each district has these hubs that you can sort of take back from the Templars and then renovate. And these hubs, these cafes, will sort of link up to your main one. And the more you have, the more variety you have, the more varied shows you have that will be playing in your theater. And some districts, it might be just people singing. Other ones might be poetry, readings. Some of them might be just political speeches. Other ones might be plays. And that's certainly non-violent. And it's stuff that really, again, it enriches your knowledge of that period. It really brings the period, the French Revolution, to life.
So do you have, when you pick a setting and you kind of get the idea about what the game you want to make is, who sits down and does all this research to find fun things from history that you can then incorporate or kind of slide in there as something that a lot of people think is fictional but ends up being real? Is there a team of researchers who surfaces this stuff for you?
We have one full-time researcher, but then we have people that we call upon, specialists that we call upon for different stuff. Like for the script, for example, we had 2 French historians that went over the script to make sure that we weren't, making up anything about the Revolution. Then, I mean, the French Revolution is a very controversial thing to this day. Nobody really agrees too much on the, contrary to the American Revolution, whereas, the British overlords, like, get out of here, and, it was done in a somewhat, it was more of a real revolution where the country rose up and overthrew the overlords, and then, the Constitution was formed. French Revolution was a bit more murky because it's a popular revolution. There wasn't really no army. It's no revolutionary army. It's the people, and there were many factions that fought over many different points. A lot of good stuff came out of it, right? The Charter of Human Rights is something that was born out of the French Revolution, but not everybody agrees on exactly, is it a good thing that it went down that way? And nobody really agrees on who the good guys, the bad guys. There's a lot of gray area.
Yeah.
So, but I think that we did maintain the essence, and historians approve of the essential, the historical validity of it. Even for the actual city itself, right? We call upon architects, people that urban designers, archaeologists, people that we go to Paris, we get old maps of the city. So it is painstaking research, and then we have a lot of people, responsible for different parts of this research, right? Not one person is responsible for all of those things. I mean, one person was responsible for like 6 months for like all of the letters, for example.
Yeah.
So have you ever had anything in the script that you thought was really cool and you're really excited about, and then the historian said, no, sorry, this just doesn't fly at all?
We did have something like that, but you know what? And I believe this is this is applicable to everything. Oftentimes, when something doesn't work and you have a constraint and you have to, dig deeper to find something, it's usually better.
Can you walk us through a concrete example where this happened?
Yeah, okay, I don't want to give anything away, but okay, at the end of the game, we wanted to have...
Should we spoiler warning this? I'm scared now.
No, not at all, not at all. So at the end of the game, we wanted to have a beat where there's a very dramatic thing that happens, and there's a very difficult choice that has to be made by a character in the game. And we needed to have something that symbolized that importance. So we wanted to have a scene just outside of Paris with a big army, and something that had to do with Napoleon. And although that scene might have been credible if it had happened 6 years later, those 6 years were crucial. I mean, even less than 6, but it was something that was just a bit too early, and we decided to find another solution, and seriously, it ends up being better.
So I have to ask, taking this game to show off to Ubisoft HQ, are they more critical now that it's close to home? Are they like, that doesn't quite look like the Paris we pictured?
They are more critical, and they are more vigilant. But frankly, I'm very surprised on how non-intrusive they've been. They've been very cooperative, and no, they've been. I haven't felt them being more critical than with any other game that I've worked on. However, they are. I think they're more observant. It's just. I think the reason that maybe I perceive them as not having been more critical is because I think they liked what they saw. So, had they not liked, maybe I would have been telling a different story.
When the games explored the American Revolution, there was like a lot of, especially in kind of the meta narrative, a lot of political talk about how for the average person, not a lot of things changed. It's still a bunch of, rich men making decisions about who goes to war. There is definitely at least one monologue where someone took the other tact and said, listen, like the revolution wasn't perfect. So for this game, do you kind of head on talk about the politics and have characters, even either in that time period or in the modern day narrative structure, arguing amongst themselves about it?
We do, and because that arguing is fundamentally part of the French Revolution. That's exactly what it was all about. The French Revolution, I mean, the extremists of today were the moderates of tomorrow, and they were dead the next day. And that happened for 4 years. I mean, everybody agreed that there needed to be a change, but nobody really agreed exactly what that change was. And everybody was really afraid that, the other party might really be secretly royalists and trying to bring back a monarchy. So it just created this sense. There's elements that are similar to McCarthyism, for example. So yeah, we definitely have arguing. And you know what? The game really has, Unity really is built with 3 different themes that are built in layers, right? The first overall theme is a theme of redemption. It's a redemption quest, Arnaud's redemption quest. If you dig one layer under that, there's what we call a Cornelian dilemma. It's love versus duty. So it's following somebody's heart versus following somebody's duty to a cause, for example. And then a third layer might be the dangers of fanaticism. That any party that becomes too blinded by fanaticism ultimately resembles itself, and it becomes the same thing, right? Like two opposites, if they go into the area of fanaticism, they just become the same thing. And the dangers of fanaticism and how they can blind people into a trap, essentially.
So all this has been great. Before we wrap up, I want to talk about literally the brass tacks, because I know it's going to be the first question that will be in our comments. Mm-hmm. For people who want to play this with friends, it'll have to be online. Will there be split screen local co-op? So it'll all be online.
Online.
And for single player, will you have to be online to play? So you can do that, but it'll be offline too.
No, you can play offline.
Just like normal, yeah.
Yep.
The other big question a lot of people brought up is we saw 4 assassins all working together. Mm-hmm. Now, if I'm playing with my wife, for example, can she be a female assassin?
No, she can't. And I'll tell you why. To be very honest, originally we had planned to.
Ignore that sign.
Exactly. So we had planned to have female assassins in the game, and essentially we ran into the reality of production. So we had to, because it's double the animations, double the voices, all that stuff, and double the visual assets, and especially because we have customizable assassin, right? So it was really a lot of extra production work, and it's not like we could cut our main character Arnaud. So the only logical option, the only option we had was to cut the female avatar, because when you're playing co-op, everybody is Arnaud, everybody else is another assassin, but they all have, for example, if we're all playing together, you will be Arnaud on your screen, and we will have our gear, our custom gear, but our faces will be just other assassins. So because of that, we know that the common denominator between everything was Arnaud. The only real option was to cut the female avatars.
Got it. Cool. Well, thank you for stopping by. It was really
pleasure.
enjoyable talking and chatting about the game.
My pleasure.
It looks fantastic.
Thanks, man.
Cool. Thank you for joining us. We will be here all week. If you want to see more videos, go to polygon.com, or you can go to youtube.com/Polygon. Until then, we'll see you next time.